Thank you, and thank you for coming over to Michigan to testify as colleagues. Representative Garfield has a question.
Yes, I have a couple of them. First of all, let me state that I am a bicycle patient. I have a double broken neck in the service. I have episodic events where my neuron is trapped, and the pain is excruciating. We have kind of a conflicting law in the state. I was stopped one time. I identified to an officer that I didn't take drugs. He asked me if I took drugs, and I said no, but I did have a prescription drug in the vehicle, but they asked me that. And I did not know, if it wasn't in the prescription vial in the state, that I was in contempt of the law, and I didn't know that. I would like to think how many senior citizens in this state do not know that. My wife had a stem cell transplant, was on chemotherapy. In 4 days, almost couldn't walk the length of that desk here in front of her. And she lost her appetite. It shrunk her esophagus. She could barely take a pill. And I've seen all this, so I truly understand what you're talking about. I had to go to my own physician to get letters from them about my degenerative spinal disease, as well as my broken neck, and that I am authorized to take Vicodin, because I was afraid the officers in the state that if I told them, they didn't care. It was not in the prescription vial. So I have a problem with that, and I'd like to address that before I leave the legislature. But my question is to you, what did you do in Maryland or Connecticut or wherever you were at that protected those citizens that were able to obtain it? Did you do anything to protect them if they were stopped or something like that? And from those who are illegally obtaining it, I will tell you, my uncle died of prostate cancer. He owned a large engineering company, one of the biggest independent automotive engineering companies in the country. At the end, one of his engineers had brought him some. He had never had anything like that in his life. He couldn't eat. All of a sudden, he was eating and doing things. Now, I was with a physician yesterday, and I asked him, he's like, "No, I heard they have a THC pill. I don't know what it is," but he said, "Yes, they do. I don't know. I've never taken it. I'm a physician." But there are differences in taking the THC pill and the other form. This is the only way to say it. When I was in the service, they had a thing called the munchies, whatever that is. But it helps people to eat when they can't eat. And so I know that it probably prolonged his life. We didn't know it, but he was able to eat stuff that he could not eat. So I would like to know, what did you do in those states to protect those who were legally able to obtain it from those who are just out there, to do whatever they want to do?
In Connecticut, it's still a proposed bill, but our proposal is that the person who has the legal right to use the marijuana has a card registering them with the Department of Public Health. If an officer should come to the scene and decide to make an arrest, he or she can do that, but the person can take the card after that to a court and present it to the judge. Then it would be up to the judge to interpret the different information, but the card would allow them to go to court with an affirmative defense. The officer also could just review the card themselves and decide not to make an arrest based on this looks like, appears to be a valid state of Connecticut Department of Public Health registry card.
That's kind of the way it works around the country, although because states have done this through the initiative process, people draft up their own bill and basically get the signatures and put it on the ballot. So it sort of runs the whole gamut, but I would suggest you do just that. You have people, and I know you might hear some groans in the back because there are people who would rather not be on a registry. But if that's the only way that you're going to allow this to happen, is people get the card and then they show that. And quite honestly, in Maryland, one of the proposals was that if you were to use a card fraudulently, that the penalties for that possession were enhanced. So you wouldn't have the case where people would get the card, take grandma's card, run down the corner, get some for themselves, they get caught, that sort of thing. You don't want patients being used and abused in that way. And so maybe you find an amendment that would do that. But having the card, quite honestly, Representative, I think you have enough experience with this issue and pain that you understand where we're coming from. And quite honestly, if you have a relationship with your doctor and you trust your doctor to take care of you in your pain situation, if your doctor said, and this Vicodin's not working, you said the Vicodin's not working, is there anything else? And he said, well, and you continue down that road, and finally there's nothing else that works. There's nothing that works. And he says, well, if all else fails, try marijuana. You understand that. You understand that firsthand. I'll tell you, a year ago I broke my leg in 3 places out in Washington State where it is legal. And I said, well, the good news is I'm out here in Washington State, so if what you prescribe for me doesn't work, I guess I can, and if the pain never stops, I can go across the line to Oregon where they have assisted suicide. We all had a good chuckle over that. I never did resort to using marijuana, but I'll tell you, the pain medications they gave me just didn't work. And I tried what you're trying, and it gets you stoned, and it doesn't necessarily do you any good. And there are people at end stage of life who don't want to be in a stupor. My father was so doped up on morphine that at the end of his life he couldn't have conversations with his family, and that was very unfortunate. And if there was something that would allow him to ease the pain and the suffering but still be lucid, then maybe that would be appropriate. And in this case, unfortunately, we didn't use that for him, and so it was a very difficult time. But I think the two of you have expressed personal situations that you understand what we're talking about, and I think whether you believe it or not, I think most of your constituents understand. They certainly understand your personal stories, and they have personal stories of their own. 40,000 new cancer patients a year are diagnosed in this state, and that's just cancer. So multiply that every year.
Follow up by Representative Garfield.
Let me just briefly state that I can't second guess what somebody would do with continued pain and suffering. I know I've been there, I was able to alleviate it as I got better, but who knows when you're in a life-threatening situation, in a degenerative state, what one person would do. I mean, to get rid of the pain, believe me, I know. My next question is something really that you brought up, and that is, should there be a condition like that? Say, naturally I can't get it because I'm really debilitated, and I can't make it to a drugstore. So I send a relative or my mom with a prescription. How are they protected from being stopped or something like that? I mean, see, this thing is, it kind of reminds me of what Representative Dean said. I mean, I got on the internet and I looked up the California law and different stuff like that. I certainly wouldn't want to, I can see debilitative situations. I don't want people with stress having it. I don't want people with hangnails having it. I wouldn't want, those kind of situations where the public is really protected and lawfully, and that those who really need it would benefit from it.
In the states that allow this, you don't find too many doctors writing prescriptions or writing recommendations for this for people that don't actually need it. I mean, these are people who, in theory, could lose their license to practice medicine if the federal government came down and really leaned on them hard. Now, you do have a First Amendment right to put in a chart what you deem is the case for a particular patient. But this has not been a problem around the country where you have quack doctors, if you will, writing prescriptions or recommendations for these sorts of hangnails and headaches. Just, it's not happening.
I'm not going to get into the name because I forgot your name already, and I know it's hard to pronounce.
That's okay.
What situation do you have where you live where, like you said, your husband had that situation with bone cancer. So how would you protect? Did you do anything to protect loved ones who would pick up the prescription and bring it back to the house so if they were stopped, that they weren't incarcerated or left with that problem?
Right. Most of the effective medical marijuana bills across the country allow the doctor to determine if a caregiver is needed. We are trying a more stringent bill in Connecticut. We are saying the patient doesn't decide if they need a caregiver, but if the doctor determines that a caregiver is needed, that caregiver is also registered as a caregiver with the registry. So that's how the protection is extended from you to the person who is assisting you.
Whether it's a loved one or an assigned caregiver?
It doesn't, it can be the person that is chosen by the patient.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.